Mission fucking accomplished. Goon Swarm is not a threat.
Good luck with your all's dumb nullsec war snuffed out #1. Anomake Keepstar is next, and then come on.
There, and then you were just going to fucking magically jump into EVE Online in a system, and it was just going to load, and nobody was going to call you fucking stupid later?
There's an Eagle fleet that has dive bombed a Megathron fleet. This is the bravest shit I have ever seen in my life.
The best possible shot to do something to the Imperium, and you fucked it up.
I talked a lot of shit over the last couple months. It's time to fucking eat some. And I showed up here to eat shit. Like,
the reason that this keeps started and get contested, and I cannot make this up, is because of tie-dye.
Guess where goons are gonna live after this war is over?
Current plan is 319, I believe, right?
Stealth.
Hi, sick.
I can tell you very clearly, our Diplos didn't even fucking care. So, like,
White daddy.
Good evening. Welcome to another episode of Untethered. We have some usuals here and a new guest today. We've got our usuals, Luke Aninan. We got LB. We got Redline. Give a wave to the camera, everybody. And
everybody.
Also, our guest on the middle left there, you'll see Corvus Onzo. Some of you may recognise his face, because Corvus is a reasonably prolific streamer of EVE Online. And what's more, not one of those streamers that make up 90% of the EVE streaming population that is streaming just mining or PvE in high sec. Corvus, from every time I seem to have tuned in, you seem to actually be out and about in low sec, not even necessarily covering up exactly where you are, which is a refreshing difference. Why don't you let us know what you like to get up to in the game?
Yeah, cool. So I go by Corvus Onzo in game. I run a corporation named Mercury Arms Inc. So we are an independent factional warfare corporation fighting for the Kadai militia. Yeah, it's been a corporation since 2021. I managed to wrangle a couple of people back from faction warfare of old. So we had a couple of people return who haven't played the game in about 3 or 4 years. We currently live in Iha, which is a system in Blackrise, so it's just about on the front lines between us and Galmil. We're mostly an EU and UK corporation, and we mostly fly nano stuff to a relatively high SP level, depending on the day of the week.
Well, it's nice to hear that. I mean, full disclosure to anybody that's watching, I have flown with Corvus on a number of occasions, and against on a number of occasions as well during the time that I've been in faction warfare. Now, it is nice to have a European FC and leader on. Obviously, the only time zone where anything ever actually happens in this game anyway. Corvus, what do you find are the most challenging aspects of faction warfare right now?
I'd probably say right now it's the funny enough, the insurgencies. In recent months, I think since July, we've had a major sort of uptick in the amount of insurgencies that affect the area we fly in. Some of them have actually directly affected us in our home system where we live, which means we're having to run insurgency sites and play the insurgency. And what that's led to in the last 4 months is we've basically been fighting Guri non-stop, more than we have done Galante at this point. We've had 3 insurgencies in our home system, and we've had 2 insurgencies directly affect us either next door or one system over. So the big issue has been insurgency stuff, mainly because it's beginning to become quite a grind to go kill multi-boxing dragoons every day of the week. And I think there needs to be some sort of change in the insurgency system or with direct enlistment to cut down on that.
This is something that obviously, I haven't had, I've lived in the same area as you for quite a while until, just about a week ago. So I've seen a number of these insurgencies come through, but I've had, as neutrals, we've had no drive. We've had no notable reason that we need to bother trying particularly hard, other than just going and trying to get some kills for the sake of getting kills. for anybody who's not familiar, do you want to tell us about what happens if the Guristas win in their home system?
So the insurgencies, when they land, they spawn a FOB, a forward operating base for the pirate militia. Corruption levels spread across multiple systems, lowering the security status of that system, potentially down to a sort of nullsec light version where aggression on gates is allowed, bubbles are allowed, etc. If the pirate insurgency managed to corrupt enough systems, the FOB system at the end of the insurgency becomes vulnerable to attack. What that means is that the opposing militia, in my case the Galante, are able to go and attack the iHub and take the system away from us without having to do the usual grinding in complexes to build it up to that 100% contested level. What that means is you have a system or mechanic in the game where you can effectively shortcut your way or headshot a system out of your enemy's control. Whereas in most systems it doesn't really matter. When it affects your home system, it becomes a bit of an issue. The recent changes to make them spawn in frontline and command op systems were really good in terms of content generation, but the pinwheel of systems appears to be very repetitive. We seem to be getting the same systems every time.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong. Isn't that something to do with sort of in the last few months or so? Do I remember correctly? Did CCP make insurgencies more weighted to spawning specifically around frontline areas?
They did, yes. There's also a mechanic as well where they will spawn more likely in the militia that owns the most systems, which up until very recently has been the Caldari. However, when I say the same systems, it's been localized to maybe a group of 5 or 6 systems that insurgency has spawned into, when there has been, on average, about 8 or 9 front lines for the past 4 months.
I'm looking at the faction warfare map right now, the regular one, not the insurgency one, and I haven't been paying attention to it for the last couple of weeks, really, but it looks now that Galente has sort of really pushed Caldari back into a kind of half and half-ish looking position, all the way back from Caldari almost having everything. It's kind of oriented in a north-south way. I'll just copy this map into here so that Redline can perhaps pop that up. I've put that in the backstage for you, Corvus, if you get a chance to bring that up at some stage. But you know, and until about a week ago, as I was saying, I was seeing that area there, and I did see that Galente did manage to headshot your home system of EHA in what turned out to be a reasonably large fight, especially in faction warfare terms, or at least in northern faction warfare terms. But then I also checked in 2 days later and found that you'd already ground it back from obviously Galente with 0% Caldari control to almost 100% Caldari control, and obviously you took it back. How long did it take you to pull that system back?
96 hours.
Okay.
That's a really, really long time.
Yeah.
Well, sort of. I mean, in my experience from when I was in faction warfare a few months ago, if it was an actually contested system, if both sides were regularly fighting there, it could take weeks or even months for that kind of thing. But EHA at the time wasn't right next to where Galente was staging. Does that sound about right to you?
Yeah, so EHA has been a command op system for a while. The reason, that amount of time is us purely grinding, and thankfully within Uprising we have a system in faction warfare called Advantage, which replaced the old tier system that was previously used. With Advantage, you run PvE sites in the system that you're working in or flying in, and that increases the victory point value of each complex. So if you have a higher percentage of advantage in that system, you are able effectively reduce the amount of complexes you have to run, and therefore the amount of time you spend in complexes in order to make gains in a system. Thankfully, we were able to do that with the help of certain groups and alliances within our militia, namely people like CTOC and UCSC. They were in US time zone. Obviously, we're in EU time zone, so it was a round the clock effort to push the system back again. Especially since if EHAR being a frontline system, if it was to become a command op system for Galante, we would lose our docking rights in that system. So our assets would effectively be locked in station.
An impression that I always got during the time that I was taking part in the Galente militia, obviously at the time, as you're aware, we lived in Vlil, which is 2 jumps from EHAR with a single pipe system between the two. And on 2 or 3 occasions, we took that system in between where we lived and where you lived, and then absolutely never made one bit of progress in EHAR, your home system there. Do you think that there's a difference in mentality between the organised Caldari groups and the organised Galente groups in terms of system capture? And I mean amongst like the real people, not the fake people who are just there to farm.
I would say there is a difference in ideology between the two militias. There always has been. With Caldari, it seems, at least my group in particular, because we live in EHAR, we've sort of formed an attachment, like an unusual attachment to this one system, which somehow motivates people to log in and grind these complexes and fight for that system. Galmil historically have always gone for a more competitive ideology of getting fights and getting wins, regardless of whether those fights are regarded as fair fights or good fights, which has led them to make good advances and has led them to create quite skilled corporations and alliances in the past. Previously, before sedition, for instance, you had people like GMVA or Spaceship Bebop. Ironically, those people have also come back to faction warfare, but they now wear sedition colors or they live in Frogbond at the moment.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, one of the reasons that I took our guys away from the area down to the southern war zone is that we found quite a collapse of small gang and small and medium fleet PvP in the area down there. I'm well aware that there's a lot of solo and very small gang content regularly going on, sort of every minute of every hour in that zone there. But do you think that what do you think it would take for people to start organising actual fleets again in the Northern War Zone? Sort of 10 to 30 to 40 people, that kind of thing.
So, from experience across the war zone, I think the lack of disorganized fleets in the north of the war zone, for instance, is more to do with time zones. If you look down, going the completely opposite way to what you say, if you look down south, where it's predominantly a US time zone, you have large alliances and large corporations that are constantly forming fleets of 30, 40 plus people. In EU time zone for Calma, we just don't have that number. We have UCSC, which is a new bro corporation at its heart. So the skill sort of level there varies from very high to very, very minimal. It's all to do with, as well, we have a lot of internal personalities that clash, myself included, with a lot of people as well, which is why Mercury has kind of stayed on its own almost. We get help and we help out others as well when we can, but generally speaking, we sort of do our own thing when it comes to fleets and choosing what systems we want to go after, etc. There is much like we did when you were in Cowmill, setting standards and approaching people can be quite difficult, but when it works, it does work. And of course, if anything, when we did run Spear, that was kind of the catalyst for your building of your alliance, I would say, with Starline joining you after that.
Yeah. I mean, I very much feel that at the time, quite celebrated changes celebrated in the moment that it was launched changes to battlefields, put an instant end to fleet PvP. I mean, I'll be honest, I was up there celebrating as well. I thought that it looked great. I thought, yeah, finally we got rid of this easily cheesable situation in there. Now you've got to actually fight the rats properly. I was going, yeah, Battlefield's going to be awesome now. And Battlefields immediately became 100% dead, with the only regular focal point for fleet fighting in faction warfare, at least in our Warzone, decimated and basically removed from the game. I mean, personally, I very much hope that, aside from making the battle cruiser orbit within the capture circle, I really just think it should be reverted at this stage. Do you have any thoughts on that?
It was definitely a case of better the devil you know when it came to Battlefields.
Be careful what you wish for type thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, again, this is it was kind of a knee-jerk reaction, kind of similar to what we saw with Skyhooks, where there was a problem. The problem had a very, on the face of it, simple solution, and it ended up, having we instead got a sledgehammer to kill a fly sort of situation. And now the battlefields that spawn, for those of you who don't know what battlefields are, they're kind of like oversized complexes. They're meant to motivate large fleet combat. They are Navy only, so no advanced ships such as T2 ships or pirate ships can get in. They're meant to invigorate Navy and T1 PvP gameplay. However, they've now turned into a kind of PvE event that you have to sit there for around an hour to run, with rats spawning in every 30 to 50 seconds. And it is quite the grind. It is an hour. Some people can do it quicker. I think our record is 40 minutes, and that's still quite a while to be sitting running a PvE site when you are logging in to get PvP.
And what do you get out of doing those sites? Like, what's the reward at the end of the tunnel?
So LP wise, you only really get an LP payout, a real LP payout, if you're running them offensively, so in an enemy system, which the payout is around 150,000 ISK, so 150,000 LP.
How much is that comparable?
Which is quite a lot.
Like ISK? Oh, it's a lot. Okay.
Yeah, it's quite a lot. It depends on the value of your LP at the time. At the moment, it's not very much because Caldari LP is kind of very low, but when they first came out, it was considered quite a lot. Contested and strategic level wise, you get 3% contested level gained on an enemy system or taken off if you're defending a system, as well as 15% advantage given or taken depending on if you're running them offensively or defensively. The 15% is quite valuable in fact, in some ways, it's more valuable than the LP. Because that enables you to be able to run, as I said before, complexes to a higher victory point value, and enables you to, in effect, push the system quicker to its vulnerability.
So I guess the question is, which part isn't worth it then? Because it sounds like it's a good reward, it's a good offensive tactic and defensive tactic, so it's worth defending. Is it worth attacking? Like, is that the problem? Because that's what I see. Like, I mostly play in nullsec, and for us to do stuff, it requires some sort of intrinsic motivator or external motivator that's like, hey, we want to go do this now because of this. So I find that a lot of it misses.
I would say the negative to it is the fact that in lowsec, a majority of people there to find PvP content. And Battlefields used to be a good catalyst for that. You would have battlecruiser and battleship fleets fights in those. However, now, since the changes, it has very much become a PvE-centric system within factional warfare, which means you have people who are logging in to get PvP gameplay having to be forced into a PvE site to run those for an extended amount of time. Yes, in nullsec, you do ratting anoms, and you do have PvE parts of nullsec, but usually you get a lot more value from them in terms of items and ISK, and a fair few of them can be run semi-AFK. Whereas in Battlefield, you have to be at your computer because the rats will kill you, and you do have to concentrate on what you're doing because the rat spawns are constant.
Okay. Well, I've got a red line. Get a pen out because I think I've got a question that I want to ask. Basically every guest, whether we are sort of getting to know somebody like we're getting to know Corvus, or whether they're a guest who's a repeat guest as well. Sorry, I'll ask you the question first, Corvus, so you can think about it while I explain it. But it's basically, how would you fix battlefields? And I want two different answers. I want one, if you had unlimited resources in the world, so you could redesign it completely from scratch, and an alternate answer, which is, are there some simple value tweaks that could be done in 20 minutes at CCP? Well, that we assume could be done in 20 minutes at CCP that would make it a lot better. So Redline, we need to come up with a snappy name for this question, a question with two answers for various different kinds of effort. But
We'll workshop
we
that.
we
We'll
have
workshop it.
we have a CSM member here on the show. So Luke, keep your ears open, especially for the potential.
I'm always listening. I think I even said on my CCP interview stream, right? Faction warfare is probably the area of space I know the least about, so I will quite happily listen in.
Yeah, so whether it's the complex one or the short one, whichever one first, Corvus, if there's an idea for fixing battlefields.
So I'll go with the simplest one first, which is change the spawn rate of NPCs in battlefields. As I said before, the issue with battlefields before they were changed was the fact that they could be effectively cheesed by keeping a single battlecruiser alive and effectively chasing it outside of the capture zone, allowing you to basically sit inside the capture zone and take it without firing a shot. Simplest way to change them would be to make it so that the battlecruiser can't leave the capture zone. Therefore, you're forced to kill it in order to take the battlefield. If money was no object and time was no object, and I had unlimited dev time, I would probably make them more of a event style site where you went in as it was promised in 2022, I believe it was, at FanFest, where battlefields were supposed to be when you hit the acceleration gate, you're going into a massive fight with NPCs fighting each other. There were explosions around. It was supposed to be very intense and very cinematic, and that's not what they are at the moment. There is a couple of wrecks scattered around. You can see there's been a fight, but mainly it is shooting rats. If we went for a more Triglavian Flashpoint style system, I think would be better. And it would really up the intensity a little bit, or thinking you're part of a bigger war rather than some players that have entered a PvE site to grind NPCs to dust for X amount of time. That's what I would probably look at doing if I had unlimited dev time. I know that's not going to happen because CCP frankly have more.
Oh, you have to dream.
Issues.
You have to.
Oh
dream,
yeah, you can have a dream.
Yeah.
You can have a dream. But I'm very much. I've streamed and I've worked with CCP on event stuff and via Twitch stuff as well. So I know very much how dev time and limits on dev time affect what they can promise and what they can produce. So I'm quite realistic in that at that point, knowing. Faction War is a very, very, very small part of EVE. And it is no ways the breadwinner of EVE. That's nullsec. That goes to nullsec. Nobody can deny it. You're an idiot if you don't say it's not so. That is where the articles are made, that's where the videos are made, and that's where the publicity comes from. So I'm very realistic in the fact that suggesting stuff and coming up with solutions almost straight away before going to CCP with them is probably the best way of getting what you want.
Marvelous. Well, obviously interject if anybody here has any more specific Corvus-specific questions right now. But other than that, a topic that I wanted just to discuss today is our experiences with returning players, be they our friends who had left the game months or even years ago who are looking to come back. Or indeed, you see people cropping up on Reddit or on the forums or in various Discords saying, hey, I don't know any of you guys, but I used to play a long time ago and I'm thinking of coming back. My personal experience with a lot of these people, whether I know them or not, is that the vast majority of returnees that I find coming back to this game may last a few days before vanishing again. And I wonder what your guys' thoughts are. I mean, maybe if we go to Luke and B, what your thoughts are as to why that might be my experience. I know that you might have a different experience. You might find that all of your returnees stick with the game and start flying a Titan again and stick around for 10 years. But why do you think that might be?
Good question.
Yeah,
I haven't really seen the returnees I've seen come back. If they do leave, it's because we haven't given them a purpose in the game. There's no like reason for them to log in. So like with your capital pilots, there's no capital brawls we can engage in. If there is, then they just lose their assets, and then there's no way to replace them. So they've come from an age where already replaced was the hashtag of the day, and now they're coming into a time when, well, now if you lose that asset, it's going to be a bit of a grind to get it back. So they're somewhat discouraged in undocking those big shiny toys. So the current players, the ones who are playing, are flying smaller things, less shiny things, more replaceable things, and maybe that doesn't appeal to those individuals, so they tend to disappear back into the weeds.
It's an interesting one. I had a player return earlier on in the week, last week, who left during blackout. So basically left, he got super frustrated. Proper like full-on nullsec player, right? So he got quite frustrated at blackout, for good or ill, depending on your opinion of blackout. Then came back, saw EQ solve, what I'm currently referring to as EQ solve, and then promptly quit again because his last message to me was, I heard they'd ended up blackout, that was great, but I've come back and I can't make any ISK. This is terrible, and then just quit again. That's from a nullsec perspective, right? Like I think there is an issue at the moment that is, I can't have big ships because I can't afford to replace big ship. And actually we were talking about this last week, right, around game theory. Like the end stage for a lot of these pilots I want the ambitious ship, right? I want the Titan, I want the faction dread, I want whatever it is.
And the content that it theoretically promises.
Theoretically, right? But it's always theoretically, because there's two parts to this, right? There's the ambition of kind of going, I want the big ship. And also the content is almost secondary to it until you've got the ship. But a lot of pilots, especially from a nullsec perspective, look at these things like Titans and stuff now, and they just go, they're not attainable, they take too long to do, so I can go somewhere else where I can find something ambitious that I can at least actually achieve. That's certainly what I'm doing at the moment.
I mean, if we're saying that these people came from the 40 to 50 billion-esque Titan era, then, as not even to play the devil's advocate, I think this is actually how I feel about it. But should such a ship be considered cheap and usable in an incredibly vast variety of situations?
I think the issue there, though, isn't just the ship value. And actually, I think 40-50 bill Titan is probably too cheap, even at the moment when they're just a glorified jump bridge.
Yeah. I'm not going to ask you what is a good price for them, but it's a question that we're all thinking.
Highly theoretical number, right? I think the problem is the ship is now a lot more expensive, and the ability to generate income is perceived as a lot lower. So it's not just the ship has tripled in price, but everything has stayed the same. So okay, it's just 3 times the work to achieve that kind of ambition. It's the ship has tripled in price, and the income is cut by a third, so it's now 9 times more effort to get to this thing, and this is a video game. And with the returning players, they tend to be an older breed of players that do not have that amount of time to invest. And so if they haven't got that ambition and that goal, then there's no reason to stay, right? Because most people want a target to work towards. If it's in WoW, it used to be, I need the level 70 character, and then I'm just going to retire that character and create another one. You still need that goal. That's my view, anyway.
Redline, I saw you Xing up there.
I did. But then I forgot the question that you asked Luke, because I was paying attention to Luke answering it. But I think it was about Titans and how much they should be.
Yeah.
But the thing is they increased the price of the Titans, but then they also made them worse. That's the thing. So what do you actually use a Titan for? in 2024.
Well, my question to you should be, what should you expect a Titan to be capable of? Because are you talking about the time when they had high-angle weapons?
Absolutely. The Titan should be the 100% bar none most powerful ship in the video game. No questions asked. It can also be the most expensive ship in the video game, but it should also be the most powerful and should be more than just a hangar trophy. Like, that's the thing. Surgical Strike, all those changes that were made to super caps way back when, they destroyed those ships. And then, income changed. Also, with the industry changes, they were made more expensive. So not only are they worse, but they're more expensive. And that's where I think the big problem is. So if you want people to want to fly those ships, you have to make them useful. But for them to be useful, there need to be reasons to actually field them. And right now, there's no giant conflicts in nullsec or anywhere that really require 1,000 Titans be on grid, which is what I joined the game for way back in 2018, and what I've been looking for ever since M2.
Do you think that what you're actually looking for to enable 1,000 Titan on the grid would be some kind of partial, or even, well, it depends how far you want to go, some kind of unnerf of the stacking penalized remote reps from fax? Well, from any remote reps in that case?
I mean, yeah, I think that...
Because Titan versus Titan, nobody gives a toss about high-angle weapons when it's Titan on Titan.
Right. Yeah, and I don't think anybody really cared about high-angle weapons except for a small group of very loud people back in the day, honestly. But I think there's no reason for, big conflicts to happen anymore. It used to be that we had... I want to say this carefully because I don't want to give credit to people who don't deserve it, but we used to have very charismatic leadership in nullsec space, and then that charismatic leadership led to fights over personal things instead of in-game things. But
well, I mean, I've said it before, but every successful group in this game is essentially a cult of personality around one or at least very few people.
Right.
I use the word cult, and that sounds like it always has some kind of an evil overtone, but that's very much the nature of any organization, including in the real world, when it comes to motivating people and getting them to join in with the cause. I mean, we've got Corvus, we've got you running a successful corporation for many years in a row. You've got a group of players who are sticking around for a long time, if not the entire history of the corporation, and you still recruit now. I've seen people joining you. So do you think that, I'm saying that without you being there, that group wouldn't exist. I think that's very fair to say. Go on, indulge a little bit.
I tried to be modest, but the fact is Mercury is made up of the CEO, the EXO, and pretty much most of the FC bench of alliances that I've been a part of in the past in factional warfare, going back to 2014. And the fact that those people left the game, came back to the game, found my corporation doing what we were doing 7-8 years ago was an attraction for them to come and join. When it comes to motivation, as I've already explained, we've formed this attachment to this home system, and I've attempted to sort of garner a almost sort of our fortress sort of mentality towards that. But it's not just that. People in Mercury actively enjoy flying with each other. They talk to each other. It's kind of like going down the pub with your mates. Everybody gets very drunk. Everybody ribs everybody and takes the piss out of each other.
Do you think that there's any kind of lessons from a smaller group like Mercury Arms where people are enthusiastic and undocking? Do you think that there's any lessons that could be scaled up for large groups like Redline is Redline? Are you kind of saying that that the personalities who are encouraging people, are you saying that they are a little degraded in their enthusiasm at the moment?
I would, yeah. I would say that there's no real reason to engage in taking someone else's space. Like,
What do you think might engage people to do that then?
I couldn't say, honestly.
Yeah.
Because I don't
Maybe
know.
some form of scarce materials that you want to go out and take.
No. Not scarce materials. Nothing about scarcity was ever good.
So that coming, and I sat back and just like, it's gonna come, and Redline's gonna walk straight into it because it's the same thing Fan does every time.
No, but
I mean,
look, here's the thing. If you made nullsec as lucrative as people think it is, because Corvus said you can make good money in nullsec. You where but where
you can make it. There's a lot of extremely simple money making in nullsec, if not high money making. Yeah,
right.
And that's kind of I tell you what. Well, this opens it up.
They're looking for.
What if there was some more engaging content?
I don't think
to make
that
money.
I don't even think that would do it, honestly, because it's
what
not.
Would do it? What would do it?
It's not. So it's not the content, right? It's the people doing it and their mentality. So I think it all kind of trickles down from the fact that everything is so expensive. People don't want to lose it. But the thing is that it's not an individual that doesn't want to lose their stuff. Like, you go talk to 10 nullsec line members, ask them if they want to drop dreads tomorrow, if they're guaranteed to lose their dread. 10 out of 10 of them will tell you absolutely, sign me up, coach, light the Sino, I'm jumping. 10 out of 10, I guarantee you. Guaranteed will still drop them.
Let me jump into that bit, because I suspect if you post-fix that with, do you want to drop your dread, there's no SRP, you'd get a different view.
I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna do that poll, and I'll have the results next week. We'll see. Okay. We'll see if I'm correct. But the thing is I do believe that at an individual level, every person who logs in to play EVE Online wants to do just that. They want to play EVE Online, and playing EVE Online is not setting in your keep star or whatever, waiting for something to happen. It's actually doing it, right? But then you've got your leaders that they don't want to get a shitty Reddit post about them, or they don't want to lose a big fight because they lose a lot of money and stuff like that. So those things don't get called for, because people don't just usually drop dreads independently in nullsec, right?
So who's doing it wrong? Who's doing it wrong? Is it the leaders doing it wrong, the players doing it wrong, or is it CCP doing it wrong?
It's CCP. It's always got to be CCP, because I can never blame players for anything ever.
What kind of system should they build to solve this?
They should revert surgical strike, the whole thing. Double.
I'm down for the surgical strike reversion yet.
Double the amount of resources available in nullsec. Double the amount of ISK that you get from anomalies. Just make it so good that people actually want to go there and live. Because we have a game where 20 to 30,000 people play it, like, max at any given time. Like, that's not a lot of people, and we need to bring more people in. And to do that, we probably need to break things a little bit and then fix them later. But
okay,
you can't just,
I mean, you did say earlier that you think that these people should go to war and take territory.
Yeah, but they need a reason to.
Yeah, what reason could there be?
You're not going to bait me with another scarcity thing.
I mean, you could just. I mean, if you're saying that they need a reason to do it, what's the reason that there should be?
So I'm going to jump in. I mean, Van, you know my theory on some of this stuff as well, right? Because I think there are two reasons to take space, right? There is the wealth and the rarity stuff. But if we assume today that the amount of resources needs to increase, and let's just take that as a baseline assumption, the scarcity isn't a reason, right? So the reason has then got to be to have a home of your own, right? Which is the new group approach rather than the existing blocks. Because the existing blocks already have, and I come from a co-CEO of Frat perspective, right? Like, we have our ISK, we have our ships, we have our, our super capital fleets and all the rest of it. So you need the small groups have to be able to fish into that. So my view has always been, and we know this, we've discussed this at depth, right, is make the space more valuable, but limit the sprawl capability of a given alliance for a number of different things and weaken the borders. So there is I'm not going to say absolute, but I am in this context, an absolute hard limit to how much SOV an alliance can sprawl over. And that requires a number of different changes, right? It requires ACLs to be off of jump bridges so that alliances hold their space. Alliance capitals defining how much space they can hold by, whether that's weakening ADMs for each jump or constellation jump or regional jump, so that your edge of your space becomes arbitrarily weak in terms of holding it from an ADM perspective, which means you've got to deploy corps to those borders, which means they're not in your core anymore. Not having them in your core also means small gangs can harass you a bit more because you haven't got everybody there in the center. So, but it is a complex issue. But I think, to me, the conflict driver has got to be groups wanting space rather than groups wanting resources.
So
that motivation's got to come from leadership. That is the core purpose of it. EHAR is just a system in faction warfare. I've lived in there, Gal, I've lived in there. It's a meaningless system on the face of it. If we didn't live there, it would mean nothing. And it means something because we live there and we defend it with every breath that we take. And that is motivated by... Exactly. Which is, as Fan said, could be translated into null set. But the question is what measures do you take from a mechanics and structural point of view in terms of you have massive sways? Go ahead.
I got it. I got the idea. So there's a question in chat that brought me to this, okay? Luke, write this down. So he said, the question is effectively, why should you take more space if you can just set in your space and make as much ISK as you want? So here's the thing. You got to make more ways to hurt your enemy without taking their space, right? So the skyhooks were good. You could raid them, pretty much anytime you wanted to. That takes away from people, and then people come out and defend what you're taking from them. So do some more things like that, I don't know, make it so you can shut off certain parts of structures if you entosis them or something like that. That would be interesting, right? Brand new, fresh idea. Came up with that one myself, huh?
They're experimenting.
Do you mean the feature that? Do you mean the feature that we had before Citadels when we could shoot station services?
Yeah, that's the one. That's the one I mean.
So bring back station services, but on Citadels.
Yeah, why not?
Shootable. I mean, why not?
Did it work?
Yeah.
So I'll tell you what. So the last time that I recall being, I don't want to say pivotal, but like really super involved in a conflict was when we were killing GOTG up in Declan when I was in NC. And what we would do as an alliance is we would literally go get Rorquals, jump them to those people's mining anomalies, and we would mine all of the ore, jet can it, and blow it up. We didn't want the ore. We just wanted to make sure that they didn't have it, and that was on their moons. So we would go to their Athenors or whatever, mine all their moons, and blow it up.
Why wouldn't you take it? Why wouldn't you take it away?
What are we going to do with it? We didn't live in Declan.
I don't know, sell it. I mean, jump freighters exist. Rorquals have a jump drive.
No, see, but that's the thing is we had no interest in the resources because we have our own resources back home, right? If we wanted to mine and get the ore and everything, we would do that.
Why not both?
Well, because we were doing...
Sorry, there's definitely something I'm missing here, because why wouldn't you just hang on to it?
It's about sending a message.
Exactly. Thank you. Corvus gets it. It wasn't about haha, we're taking your ore. It's about haha, fuck you. You can't mine your ore because we own you.
We do the same thing at a smaller scale, be it in faction warfare. When if we kill a particular group that we don't like, we'll point the pod and then we'll sit there and kill the wreck and all the drones that they have just to send them a message saying you're not getting anything from here. Time to go home.
And there was another comment in chat. So, and I want to kind of go back to the before times as well. So, Rockin' Rocket says that I don't think anyone sane would say Rourke's mining in the Rourke era was good for the game in any measure. But I will tell you one thing.
There is a measure. There was one measure, and I just replied with it, saying it was great for scaling content, terrible economically.
The thing is like, you take 10 Rorqual pilots, 7 of them are stupid as hell. And they will die easily. It's 5 of them won't even call for help. Like that's the thing. And when you have so many people out doing that stuff, it makes it so that the game feels alive. Like warp through nullsec, right? Warp through nullsec. And yes, in that time they mined 60 Rorik's worth of minerals. So what? Who cares? It's a video game, right? We should be able to do things like that and to have money to spend on the game so that we can actually play it and lose ships, and no one cares if they lose 100 billion or a trillion isk. Maybe a trillion they would care about, but you know what I mean.
You always care about losing a trillion, right?
Yeah.
You should care about losing a trillion. The problem there, though, is, and this is a soft mechanic question more than it is anything else, is, yeah, okay, it was great. There was lots more whaling going on in space. Space was a lot more active. You'd always see Goku fleets every, 15 minutes and then have to form up and defend against it. And that was great, right, from a content perspective. The problem, what still comes down to, though, is the small groups couldn't use those rorks because they couldn't protect them. The large groups could have their umbrella and protect them, and because of the income, they could continuously just replace them and buy more dreads and buy more caps and buy more supers and buy more titans, which then just entrenches that problem even further.
Problem.
So you still need some other change to make that.
Infinite supers is a problem? Why is having infinite supers a problem? Why is infinite supers and dreads a problem?
Let me explain it. The reason for that is because for any other group wanting to get into null space, they can't. Because the ramp curve for those groups to actually be able to fight back is so high,
it's just loop.
Not even worth it, right?
It's a feedback loop in terms of power.
Then the only choice is to become renters.
Ooh.
Then you have your blue.
I love renters, but
I mean, to kind of to stay on the same topic, but also to steer it back. Something that I have found with a lot of returning players is that they are looking at the past where they, when they had in their mind their best times in EVE. They are very often they're looking through rose-tinted glasses at what they want EVE to be again, what they want it to be like, and they are combining it with a refusal to look at what is available in the game. For example, if I talk about my alliance, watch this. Let's say we fly a lot of Executor Navy issues. I might have people coming back to the game who want to fly a lot of Absolutions and Guardians, right? Because what they loved about the game was the heavy brawling in a fleet. And that's how they did it then, and they had a great time then. There is heavy brawling available now. It's just not exactly the same as it was back then. And what I have found with a fair number of failed returnees is that they come back to the game and they will accept nothing less than an exact copy of their corrupted memory of what the game was like several years previously. And if they can't fly their favorite ship from back then, even if the same kind of style is available now but in a different configuration, they're going to feel disappointed. I think that something that a lot of people could do to enjoy this game more upon returning is to be a little bit more open-minded as to the different styles of ships and flying and the new mechanics that have arrived, to try and regain that thrill there rather than demanding that exactly what they remember comes back.
Could you
and that could apply to I want to fly a Titan and fire a boson at a gate when an enemy fleet comes through as well.
I suppose. Could you describe any of the recent thrilling things that have been added to the video game?
If we're talking about over the years since some people left, then to a lot of us, for example, command destroyers with Bushers have been around the entire time we've been playing the game. For some of us who've been playing for getting close to 20 years, we have a lot of friends who weren't here for that kind of change, even that far back. We have a member of our own, of my own corporation, who didn't have any experience with command destroyers and has come back to the game within the last 2 weeks and has found that he loves doing it and has figured out how to start learning to be really good at it. And he's somebody who's, taken the bull by the horns here, and they've found something new in the game, and they're having some of the same kind of fun that they had in the past, even though it's different,
I mean, I suppose so. I think J4 Calkins in the chat and I are on the same page, because it's not a single thing when I asked you that question. And that's kind of what I'm getting at. I don't think that, and I'll be honest, I haven't engaged with everything that's come out in recent months, even years, but I have looked at it all, and none of it seems like it's even like Navy dreads and pirate ships and Navy battle cruisers and destroyers. Like, those are all cool things, but I wouldn't call them thrilling, right? I wouldn't call them something.
Well, that's very subjective.
It is. It is very subjective.
Yeah.
It is. It is extremely. I know LB.
It depends what you hit. I very much feel that obviously this is subjective as well, obviously, but I very much feel that a lot of people, particularly returnees to this game, they behave as if they're unable to get an erection unless their ship costs 2 billion ISK plus, Whereas in faction warfare space, the Navy meta has made a lot of this stuff, a lot of what you would fly, a lot cheaper than you might have spent in the past for your brawls before the faction warfare changes. But does that mean that these brawls that play out, a fight plays out over the same amount of time with the same logy pullback and struggle, just because the ships are cheaper, does that mean that this isn't fun now? And it might not be to some people. Sometimes the cost is a huge portion of the fun to some people, but equally I've got a large number of people in my alliance who are looking at the skill expression in the fight rather than look how much my ship cost. Look how much my enemy's ship cost.
And I think one thing you're talking about, like, you're talking about ships that are cheaper, that are still available, but they're not as good as the ships that are more expensive. So
yeah, but what's good? The enemy's flying the same cheaper ships.
But the enemy isn't flying the same cheaper ships. That's the thing. Once one group upships, then everyone else is upshipping. They're following the trend.
Yeah,
like that's
I mean,
how it
in
works.
faction warfare, there's a bit of a limit.
I would say that's very dependent. That's very dependent on the fight that you're having. Depending, like, for instance, stuff like, for instance, what Fan previously mentioned, the ENI, for instance, can be fit to take on battle cruisers, which are objectively bigger ships, more expensive ships. So I think it all depends on what your motivation is to play the game, right? So for us, it's to get good fights, to have fun, hang out with our friends, and have a laugh, and occasionally control a system or two. If the motivation for you is to fly the biggest and most expensive ship, then you need to find a part of the game that allows you to do that. Whether or not that part of the game is motivated by your leadership or motivated by circumstance, but you can't just log in and expect the game to be the same as it was 10 years ago, because it isn't. It's a completely different game than it was 10 years ago, from when it was 15 years ago. Hell, from 5 years ago. The meta of ships has changed. And also the reasons why people log in have changed as well. So to go into a game that you haven't logged in 10 years, 15 years, and expect to jump straight in is... I struggle from my perspective to empathize with people who do that. You would know going in immediately as soon as you press login that this game is changed. And we see that from Reddit posts when I haven't played in 10 years. What's changed? Okay, well, here's an expansion page with the last 10 years of updates. Happy reading.
Yeah. I think that a lot of this comes down to in low sec, in faction warfare in low sec, in null sec after coming back to the game and finding that your Titan can't do as much as it used to do in the past.
Anything.
I think that maybe not even most, but a significant number of these players who end up disappointed that things aren't exactly as they remember have a lot of possibility ahead of them if they are open to a completely different meta in terms of ships and how you fly the ships as well.
Yeah, and I did see a message in chat a while back asking, kind of what I was looking for. You know, is because at this point, I would be a returning player because I, for the first time since 2018, am not even subscribed to the video game because when I log in, I can't find anything to do, right? Like that's what I do. I log in and I say, okay, I'm going to roam nullsec and look for fights, and I do that for like an hour. I see nothing, and then I log out and I don't log in again. That's how it goes for me. But what I would like to see and what I think would encourage people to come back more is some giant fuck off Titan fight with 1,000 Titans on grid, dreads flying every which way, whatever, what have you. But you know, that's what brings people in because you look at like the Twitch streams during the AT. Those things get 10,000 viewers, right? 10,000 people watching those streams, those are all people that could be playing the game and engaging in that content. And when we used to have those big fights, we had the same kind of streams go up of those too. And thousands of people would tune in to watch those. They would be engaged with the game from afar and want to be there and want to be playing it. Like I remember I would be at work during a big fight or something, like so devastated because I'm missing this huge dread brawl that's happening and I wanted to be there so bad. But now oh look, they're crashing CFIs into another group of CFIs. How engaging. I'm sad that I'm missing it. That kind of thing. So I would like to go back to giant fuck off capital fights.
Well, I mean, if you cross your fingers, Redline, now might be the time for you to... I mean, that just looks like you're flipping off the camera. Now...
No, that looks like...
Now might be the time for you to come back to prepare for that if the leaders of both the Imperium and PandaFam are in the right mindset to want to fight each other as they draw physically closer together on the map. If you trust your leaders, then hopefully that is something that you can expect in the coming months or year. Otherwise, what's the point, right?
Like, just a question then for Redline. If, going back to your story of logging in and finding nothing to do, if the conflict was on your doorstep and you logged in and you'd seen a bunch of targets, war targets, etc., in your home system, and you had people online in your corporation, in your alliance, in a fleet, ready to go, would you have stayed online instead of logging off?
Absolutely.
So really the problem isn't really the mechanics of Titans and the capital ships. I would say the problem is the lack of conflict in nullsec, and that can be put down to the fact that there is a vast amount of distance between certain groups that would be fighting each other, right?
I wouldn't necessarily say that. I would say that because the last big war was taking one side of the galaxy and moving it to the other to fight the other side. Like that was the concept. And that's not, and I see the chat saying it's harder to do than, just wishing it was going to happen. But I think that distance is, I think it's fake in the game. Distance can be closed very quickly, very easily, and it's not hard to do. You got wormholes, you got NPC space, you have all sorts of things. But I guess now both of the biggest groups in nullsec are going to be in places without NPC space, right? That's, I don't know, but I don't expect any conflicts. There's no reason for it.
This is probably about to break into the subject that we'll probably have to wait until next week at this stage.
Which would be what?
Which would be the 1000th stream about EVE Online, where we talk about how to make nullsec fight each other.
Oh, yeah?
Right,
yeah.
well, I tell you what.
That's what a lot of the streams are about, because that's what we're trying to do. I think if you and Corvus, I respect the hell out of you for streaming. LB, I respect the hell out of you for streaming, because if you dedicate time to stream the video game or even stream about the video game, you want to be engaged with it, right? Even if you're not playing it, you want to be involved with it. And I personally, I want to be involved with it, right? I want to log in and actually go and do stuff. But it's, I don't know. That might be a topic for another day.
I very much hope that at some stage in the next few months we will get the opportunity for a special edition of Untethered, maybe even an impromptu edition of Untethered, for one of the legendary 12-hour fights to break out, where we send some eyes and commentate on what we see happening. I'm really looking forward to that inevitability one day.
Yeah, I think.
But I think for now we're going to.
If the game's still running by 2028, when CCP finally figures out how to, do some conflict drivers, yeah, it's probably fine.
Well, on that note, we'll go through each of us. We'll come to your last, Corvus. But any final words? B, do you have any final thoughts on what we've been talking about today?
Well, I've been holding my tongue a bit here, but we had a conflict driver that was supposed to come to the game, and then we all screeched and yelled and complained about it, and they turned the whole thing off. So I don't understand. Anything we suggest to try to drive conflict in nullsec will be shouted down by someone on Reddit or someone on Twitter or someone on the forums calling for someone to be
on the
fired
CSM.
and asking for everything that's being put forward to be reverted back to the way it was, and then we're right back to square one. So I mean, it'll be a fun topic to talk about, but I'm doubtful.
Luke, any final thoughts today?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest risk is kind of answer back to LB's point, because I don't think if we're talking about skyhooks here, which I think we are, as the conflict driver, LB, correct me if I'm wrong. I think the problem is not whether it was right or wrong. I think the problem is there is always a habit of a level of overcorrection being applied. I mean, same with the conversation we're having with the Battlefield conversation, right? Is the pendulum was there an issue with skyhooks? I think there probably was. I think they were too open. Now they're too closed the other way, right? The pendulum has just swung completely the opposite direction as a knee-jerk reaction, where it probably should have settled, which was, it has a window each day. It's not an hour, because an hour is silly every 3 days. That's just too limited. I think, or you just had that secure silo. That would have probably got rid of the problem. Like, the raiders can raid stuff out. That's great. The owners that can't guard it 24/7 can still get something, right? I think the problem there is the pendulum tends to just swing too far in the other direction when a change is made. In my opinion.
Red line?
I have my skybooks.
Corvus said my favorite phrase earlier, kind of. I always talk about how CCP likes to hit things with hammers instead of cut out things with scalpels when they're making changes to the video game. And if anyone from CCP is watching, I would encourage you to please put your hammer away. Get the scalpel out, put some effort in, and figure out how to fix your game instead of just doing whatever the bottom line tells you.
And Corvus, our visitor for the day.
I think the issues with Eve, my final thoughts are basically the issues with Eve, I think, can be put down to a lack of motivation in driving conflict. And I think that it all starts with that. If you are motivated to go to war with your enemies, then content will follow. At the moment, there isn't very much available. And for that to happen, there needs to be a change to give leaders, whether they're in low-sec or null-sec, a means or reason to go to conflict or go to war. And that isn't a simple change of changing code or changing a number in a statistic for a ship. It's a very deep, very complex change that will need to be made to the game. Hopefully it happens. We'll see. CCP has surprised us in before. We're just waiting for another miracle, I guess.
Thank you very much. Well, I'm sure that all of us regulars here, we're very thankful for having you on today. It's been interesting. It's been deep, and we hope to be able to use you as a template for talking with other corp leaders, streamers. Typically not all of not everybody that we would have on does several things all at the same time like that. But thank you very much. Thank you for tuning in today. We should be back at the same time next week.
Oh, but the chat made a comment that I have to comment on it.
Here's the footnote for the episode.
20,000 people playing a video game with hundreds of spaces to inhabit is not a lot of people.
You heard it here, guys. Redline wants half the systems in Eve deleted.
I do. I absolutely do. If you delete half of nullsec and make nullsec unlock it again, ooh, imagine.
No. Don't do nullsec. Just delete half of highsec. There you go. Start with Gia. Perfect.
Yeah, tell you what, and hopefully you're not going to be able to end the show before I say this. Perhaps we could use some kind of Equinox-like system to force some systems to be worthless, essentially deleting them from the game. But never mind.
Weird.
And on that
That'd be weird.
On that note, no, absolutely not. We're gonna raid King Fats when you get there. Send him the purple hearts like you do. Tell him we said hey and that we love him, and follow him too. He's a cool dude. See ya. That was fast.